Welcome to our monthly Charter School Investor Podcast, What Charter School Leadership Looks Like. I'm Alan Wohlstetter, founder and president of School Improvement Partnership. Each month, we meet with leaders in the charter school sector to better understand how they land the plane while it's still being built. Our guest today, Anand Kesavan, founder and chief executive officer of the Equitable Facilities Fund, which currently provides $1 billion of low-cost facilities financing for high-performing charter schools in historically underserved neighborhoods. And now to our guest, Anand.
Thanks, Alan. It's great to be here with you.
Thank you. When we had talked a little before, you mentioned that your mom was a public school teacher who started a charter school in Detroit. I was curious, what did you take from that experience or learn when you saw her doing what she did?
Yeah, I swear, where I really got my inspiration for getting into this line of work. I started really young in a household of educators. And for me, we being a child of immigrants, education was paramount. It's all we heard every day. How's school going? How are you doing? And I always thought that my mom would want us to go to the school that she taught at. She loved it. She loved teaching kids. She taught 8th grade English in Detroit public schools. And not until later in my school journey that I realized why she didn't want me to go to this school. It was a pretty tough environment. Schools were underfunded, and her 8th grade classroom didn't even have books half the time. So my parents exercised what you'd call old school choice, which is as soon as they saved up enough money, they moved. And they moved, about 15 minutes away into an area where we can get better schools. And the 8th grade I went to was world class. It was fantastic. And that was a choice that not all parents and children have. And that's one of the reasons I want to work in this industry, to give all kids the choice to go to a better performing school, even if the parents can't get up and move. So my mom's journey continued after that, where finally there's got to be a better way. And she teamed up, and that was when she was teaching in the district school, right? And she
Right.
teamed up with a bunch of other educators. This is in the mid-90s when charter schools were not a thing yet, to help launch a new thing called a charter school. And they launched a 400 student charter high school in Detroit with not only a plethora of books, but they also had computers for every kid and a beautiful facility. And it was a story of how you can get a small team of educators together to do something better for the kids. And I was always inspired to see how we could scale that model. Those very small schools for a small community, how we can scale that model nationally. That's what we're doing today.
Interesting. Yeah, when you say that, what strikes me is that she was a little bit ahead of her time. And it takes a lot. The world keeps changing, but at that point, it really hadn't yet. Charter schools were invented in 91 in Minnesota, something like that. Here she is in the mid-90s in Detroit deciding to do that. While it's about education in a little bit, it's really about being the change maybe that you want to see.
That's right. That's right. And I think that's where you find inspiration. You have to find your inspiration as a leader and things that would mean something to you. So for me, it was finding that for my mom's work. And then later in my journey, finding it starting schools abroad.
Yeah, I believe you said that you traveled to, was it India and Guatemala to
Yep.
look at schools before starting EFF? So I was curious what you learned from those experiences, because there's a whole different education system, the overlay of colonialism and what that brought, certainly in India and everywhere. So it's different dynamics, but I assume there's some things that are transferable.
Yeah, I learned a lot about running schools. The most important thing I learned is that running schools is really hard. And I gained a huge respect for anybody, whether you're in the village of India or whether you're in New York City, that you decide to spend your career trying to build schools for low-income children. This is just a big respect. I was humbled by some of the smartest people I've ever seen choosing to do this work. And that inspired me to use what skill sets I had. And my skill set's not running a school, right? And to help folks like the community leader I worked with in India or in Guatemala, or like my mom, who know how to run great schools, but don't want to run a real estate company for their school. So is there a way? That's my skill set. in financing and real estate? Is there a way that we could do nonprofit work in service of those doing the really hard work in the community? And that's what really inspired me to go into ESS, seeing the struggle our schools had in India and Guatemala, trying to find just facilities, right? Spending a lot of time trying to raise money to put 4 walls up rather than spending that time in the classroom. That's not fair. It's not fair that our school leaders have to spend a ton of time trying to put 4 walls up and a ton of money out of the classroom for those 4 walls. So that's where ESS comes in to fill that gap. So our school leaders can do what they do best and spend their money where it's really needed in the classroom.
Sure. And make it so that you don't necessarily need to leave your neighborhood to have a good school choice, which I feel like it's also a part of what you've done through EFF. You mentioned something as you were talking about the experience abroad. I know you did spend quite a few years as an investment banker, I think in the municipal bond space, public finance space. So a lot of public projects, if you will, probably water systems and anything else that passes for government projects these days. I'm curious how that experience laid the seeds for EFF. I could be missing it, but I feel like to some degree in the investment community, they're not always as public spirited as the folks that run charter schools or even your team at EFF. They want to get that return for the investors. And how did your experience as an investment banker sort of help lay the seeds for what you were going to do at EFF?
Yeah, thanks, Alan. Well, I found my inspiration from my mom starting the schools abroad. I had to match it with having the skills to actually implement. So we're going to talk about leadership in a bit, but any leader's got to have a ton of inspiration and you got to match with skills. And investment banking is where I found a lot of the skills that are the backbone of EFS. Also, 2 other careers I had, which is helping run schools in Texas and in philanthropy. So I've had 3 careers, investment banking, schools, and philanthropy. And EFF is almost this perfect combination of the 3, where we take philanthropy, match it with capital markets, and then we invest in schools. So to any budding leaders out there trying to do big things, I match your inspiration, your dreams with actually going on and building these skill sets. I spent my first 15 years of my career in those 3 industries, which is how we run EFF today, knowing all 3. But the investment side is really the cornerstone of our business. And people always give me a lot of credit for thinking of the idea or launching the idea. But as any entrepreneur will tell you, what most entrepreneurs do is take something that already exists and do it better. So I didn't actually invent the idea. This idea has been around a long time. It's just a revolving loan fund. And anybody who's worked in the clean water sector will tell you this stuff's been around for a long time. There's been billions, probably hundreds of billions of projects done under this exact structure. And we modeled ourselves after that. I was an investment banker and I covered state revolving funds where in the 80s, the federal government really wanted to clean up our waterways. And it was something everybody needed and wanted for clean drinking water. And we took money from the feds, put it into trusts at a bunch of states, and then built really strong credits, marketed those credits to investors to build public projects. And it was a tried and true method. And all we did here at EFF is take that method and apply it to charter schools. You have a bunch of really strong underlying assets in charter schools. You put them all into a big pool. You over collateralize it with philanthropy. Hopefully we'll collateralize with government money as well. And we basically synthetically create the same thing as a state revolving fund and how we've been funding clean water for decades now. And that experience of building those entities, of rating those entities and marketing those entities to the rating agencies and investors was a cornerstone of what created what EFS today. And we're really proud to have had no defaults to date. We're proud to have issued almost $1 billion in debt and more than $1 billion in loans. We're proud to have raised more than $300 million, soon to be more. We're proud that we have an A rating from S&P and our bonds priced in the AA category because our investors understand how strong this default tolerance really is. And all that came from modeling it right after these clean water state revolving funds.
Yeah. You actually raise more questions than you answer with that, because what you beautifully done is taking something that worked in one sector and applied it to another, which is quite different. You maybe if you've seen one water system, you've seen them all. But if you've seen one charter school, you've seen one charter school. It's a little different. Help me with this. Some would say that EFF is an overnight success that took 6 years. So what are some of the learnings that you had along the way? Just personally, really, something where, because I feel like as a person who's growing, but as a leader who's growing, there's some things you try this and then you go down.
It seems like it happened fast from the outside. And then when you're actually part of it, you only see the outside, you only see the result. The part of it is like how the sausage is made has been quite a journey. As you said, lots of pivots, lots of changes. But I'd say three big lessons for me. And we're still a startup in a lot of ways. 6 years, not a long time in the grand scheme of the world. But three big things I had to think back. First, you got to think big. Got to think big. You got to be really confident in that big vision you have, especially when you know it can work. Not let the naysayers stop you and stay the course. All right, there's too many leaders who have these big ideas, and the first 10 people you talk to are going to poo it, right? That's human nature, and or why you shouldn't do it, or why it doesn't make sense, or even my parents were like, you should just do a normal job, right? We moved to this country so you can get a job, not so you can start a nonprofit. And that's the reality of life. And the great leaders, the ones who had that idea, stuck with it, stayed the course. That's one. Think big and stay the course. The second is, and this is going to sound contrary to stay the course, but is to constantly make small pivots. So don't abandon your idea, and you don't need to make some like monumental big pivot, right? A pivot is when you hunker down one foot and then you move the other, right? Basketball, right? In this case, you hunker down on what's working. What part of your business model is really working well? And then in real time, be open-minded to make small changes that are necessary, both because your idea needs to improve and because the world's changing, market changes, right? The market's different now than it was 18 months ago, obviously. So we need to adjust to it and adjust to it in real time. And the great entrepreneurs are the ones that continue to move as the market moves. So you have the obvious big ones like Netflix, moving from mailing DVDs to becoming a streaming service. And in retrospect, that was obvious, but you had to have a leadership team who was visionary and was open to changing with the times. Most changes aren't that obvious. There actually are that in retrospect. There were entrepreneurs who made a bunch of small ones, and we made a lot along the way. Our business plan today doesn't look exactly like it did 7 years ago when I wrote it. So that's two. So first, think big and stay the course. Second, be open-minded to making a lot of small pivots and learning. And third is invest in people. It's invaluable. People gave me this advice early on, and I listened to it. I didn't completely understand it. How important it was to invest in people, in your board governance, your funders, and especially your team, your senior team, with people who have complementary skill sets, have raw talent, who are very driven, aligned with your vision, and then put a lot into them, a lot of time, mentorship, trust, and let them fly. And I've been very lucky with board members, with funders, with schools, and especially my team. Like I've had a senior team who's been with me since basically the beginning. So I've had my leadership team has mostly been with me in the last 5 years, which is almost unheard of in most startups. They have a lot of turnover. And that's because we really over-index on people early on and continue to do so. So think big, be open-minded to making small pivots and learning, and invest in people. Those are the three big reflections.
Yeah, those are important takeaways at a lot of different levels. And I think when you talk about investing in people, it reveals the next broad subject we're going to talk about, which is really leadership at many different levels, which is what this podcast focuses on. And we've had the pleasure of working with many of the members of your leadership team and at School Improvement Partnership. And I wonder, is it fair to say that you have a philosophy of leadership that you put into action? I appreciate a part of it, as we've heard, is that you've invested with people and invested in people. And perhaps part of that, I feel like, just from what we've seen, is you really empower your team.
Yeah, thanks for the question. I think I'm personally obsessed with entrepreneurs. I think entrepreneurship is one of the coolest things in the world. And a big part of that is the actual person and the leader. And I'm a big fan of reading about Sam Walton and how he started Walmart and It's not just about the technicals of it, but what drives a person to actually not just run one store, but run hundreds, and how they got there. And it's usually one common thread you'll find between all these folks is they are obsessed with their business. It's in a healthy way, right? They're interested in it. They're inspired by it. And we all always look for that. I always look for, is this what they are driven by? And I see some of these school leaders, it's just mind boggling how good they are at their job and how interested they are in their communities and their children and running that school. And those tend to be the folks who are the best. But I'll give you my quick framework and how I think about leadership in general, but also at charter schools. First, you got to have a vision, right? You want to invest in somebody who has a big vision for what they want to accomplish. It's not just like, hey, I want to run a school. No, I want to run the best school in my city, and here's how I'm going to get there. And here's why I want to do it, right? Folks work from the heart. But this job is too difficult. This job of running schools is too difficult. It doesn't pay well. It's very stressful. You're not going to do it unless you really care. You have a big vision and you have a big why. And we look for that when we talk to folks. And the ability to share this vision, right? Especially at a public school, you're not going it alone. So a leader who can't recruit folks to come along with them will struggle. So can they share this vision with their board, with the public, with funders, with parents? And of course, folks like us in the industry, we look for that. So that's the first thing, broad vision and leadership. Second, I look for experience and execution. So this is where you're taking this broad thing and then putting the micro on it. You have to have some experience executing something. And execution is very hard. So we look for three parts of that. One, operations experience, ideally at a school. But has this person actually built a sustainable enterprise, whether it's small or big? Second, academics, pedagogy. Did they have experience in executing an academic plan, ideally at scale, and with some proven results? And third, under that execution category would be talent recruitment and management. The people managing, we talked about that in the lessons I learned. People managing, people recruiting is a huge part of a school leader's job. We want to see, have they done that ideally with teachers and teacher leaders? So that's under the execution. So first was vision, second was execution. Under execution, operations, academics, and talent. Those are the three things to really look for. And then the third, which is, I guess, obvious, but it's not always, is in any field, but do you have a deep experience in the actual topic? And in this case, in running schools, and specifically knowledge of your community, your families, your scholars. School leaders we tend to see having the most success go really deep in their community. They know why they put their school in that corner. They know where they want to expand in the future. They know which neighborhoods and houses their families are coming from and why. They have a very clear understanding of the problem they're trying to solve and who they're solving it for. And most of the school leaders, probably all the school leaders we invest in, have a very strong sense of that. So big vision and ability to communicate it. 2, execution experience. And 3, deep knowledge of your community, your students. Okay.
Sure. As you're saying that about the EFF borrowers and successful charter schools and CMOs, it makes me also think about the philosophy of leadership that you put into action at EFF. So I want to understand that a little bit since we're talking to you. How to keep people with you for 5 years, empower them the way you have, and continue to grow and improve execution? What are some of the pieces in your journey as an entrepreneur that leadership has meant for you?
Yeah. So I'd say 3 things. So a couple of things. First, we're really anchored in our mission, vision, and values. I know it sounds hokey, and I'm a first-time CEO, right? I started this org 6 years ago, and I thought it was hokey that we spent so much time. We had consultants, mentors in the first year before we ever made a loan on establishing what our mission is, what our vision is, and what our values are. So the mission being the kind of why, the vision being the what, and the values being the how. We wrote these out. We debated them. We continue to all the time, but really hunker down on them. Make it clear why you're doing the work. Make it clear where you're going, and make it clear how you're going to behave as you get there. And make that clear when you recruit, make that clear when you're keeping your employees, make it clear when you're actually making decisions.
Do they
Um,
ever change or evolve a bit, or is that sort of the small pivots you referred to?
a little bit. We'll evolve them. We'll change words here and there. We'll change what value might mean or how we have it work. So our vision has pivoted a little bit over the years to become even broader and bigger. If anything, our vision was just too small. I might have envisioned a $3 billion fund 5 years, now I envision a $10 billion fund, right? So there's things like that, but directionally they're pretty similar. Our mission is to really serve underserved communities, make sure schools have affordable facilities so they can put the money back in the classroom. And that hasn't changed. We've gone a little deeper into some of the definitions of how we define high quality schools, how we define the communities we want to serve, how we define facilities impact. But for the most part, our mission, vision, and values have stayed pretty consistent over the years. While our business model has changed, those have stayed consistent, right? The second thing is we run our business highly school operator centric. So if you come to work at EFS, if you deal with us in almost any way, we're always thinking about what's best for the school first. That's a big difference. Our folks who come work here could work anywhere they want, right? They could make more money working at a bank. They could go do something. They could go do something else in their lives. Why you want to work here is because we're always putting our schools first, because our schools are where our kids go and we care about serving children. In the language we use, in the way we communicate, and the way we make decisions, right? We're a nonprofit. We're always trying to put as much money back into the school every time we make a decision. We're careful how we spend money because every dollar we spend is a dollar coming out of school eventually, right? And we're unapologetic about it. And in the long term, that leads to make this a great place to work for folks who care about school. And last, we're unapologetically outcome oriented, right? At the end of the day, and this is going to sound hokey again, but at the end of the day, there's a lot of reasons why you want to work on a team or be on a team, but everybody likes to be on a winning team, right? And especially one that's hunkered in values and is school centric, is that we set goals, we set big goals, and then we really celebrate meeting them, and it makes it a fun place to work, especially when you meet those goals. And if you don't, it makes it fun because you have to re-strategize to try to get there. And this isn't just about EFF, it's also the schools. When we look at schools and they're setting really clear goals, there's no excuses, and they're trying to get to those, whatever those goals are. And I think those are the teams that succeed in the long run.
Yeah. As you're saying that, it makes me think about not only in a school context, but also in a company context, how you underline that culture, particularly with remote offices and of course, COVID and everything. I know when you get everybody together periodically, that's beautiful. I know that's one way in which you work on making sure that the culture is felt and not just stated.
Absolutely. Yeah, we, like every other business out there, we've had to make pivots around the pandemic and being together in person. I'm still nostalgic about 2017, 2018, and 2019. Even up to the day before the pandemic, our team was all together. We were whiteboarding, and it was the energy. We were debating. It was a lot easier to do that in person. Let's just be honest. It was, and I loved it.
I remember walking in on you all in your New York office somewhere in some building in Midtown. It was not some fancy skyscraper. And I walked in and I almost tripped over Anand. And then next to him is Wendy Berry and Michelle. Everyone's there. There was a long table. It's not like you had an executive office or whatever. Everyone's in the bullpen.
Yeah. Long table, a lot of whiteboards. And it was just a constant connections, constant collaboration. So when we talk about these little pivots, they were happening in real time. They were happening every day. The way we looked at a school, the dashboards we used, almost everything was changing, which was really great for our first few years. Now, what we found is when the pandemic hit in 2020, we were actually prepared in some ways because we had been such a strong team by then. We had so many collisions over the years, and we already had 1 day a week where we were working remote on Fridays. So people had home offices, and we were prepared going in 2020. We had a good year. We actually very productive year post-pandemic in 2020. What we weren't prepared for was for it to last longer than that. Because our strategy was pretty fixed for the year. Execution was not difficult, bro. What was more difficult was thinking with long-term planning, hiring, mentorship, onboarding, things that happen after a year. So in 2021, when we still didn't go back to the office, that's when we had to reevaluate how we really built culture remote.
So as a leader, what's an area where you learned and grown the most during this 6-year journey?
I think where I've learned the most is how to prioritize and delegate. How to prioritize the biggest things, and then how to use that prioritization to delegate performance of those things to the most talented folks, right? And hire those talented folks and let them fly. And that's been just transparent. I'm a topic expert. Right? On how to invest. I was always strong at how to do financial structuring, get these loans done, bonds rated, get the bonds sold. What I'm not as a person, I'm not a professional CEO of a company, right? That's not what I did before this. And I've had to become that, which has been fantastic. Learning a new skill in the middle of your career is one of the coolest things ever. And I spent a lot of time figuring out how to prioritize and delegate, especially when you're doing really big things like raising billions of dollars and not having to do all that myself and finding really strong senior leaders to do it. And then really strong associates and analysts to help them.
Sure.
That's been my biggest learning and biggest growth. And probably the thing I'm most proud of in the last 5 years, because it's worked out really well.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think any entrepreneur can relate to that. I think for me, it's really sometimes the things that I'm certain about or that I'm darn absolutely and insisting upon, I need to look at that, reach out a little bit and get another perspective on that. And sometimes, and this is more about sort of the execution, sometimes there's a different timing or a different way to do it than I was so determined to do. And so I continue to struggle with that, as well as the prioritization and delegation, which are really good tips. Just the third and last area I wanted to take advantage of our time to discuss is, and you touched on it a little bit, is charter school success and measuring it. Our director at School Improvement Partnership, Arthur Mitchell, always says, be careful what you measure, because that's what you'll get. What's interesting to me is, and you touched on it a little bit from a leadership perspective, is what defines a good school from an EFF perspective, and has that changed over these last 5 years?
Yeah, this is one of the hardest questions in our industry. Also, one of the things we're going to debate the most over the years, right? We're going to make in the coming years, have 500 school campuses we've invested in. I always wonder, how are we going to know if our schools are really that much better, right? And how are we going to measure? We might know, but how are we going to measure it and prove it to other people? And that's what you're getting at. We are building an entire school quality and data team around this, where we can work on both subjective and objective evaluation of our schools in both the short term and the long term. The general framework I put on this is first is the more micro, shorter term academic impact. We have to measure this. We can debate how we measure it, but it's not acceptable to not measure it. And we're not charter schools out here at EFF. We don't think we should just build a bunch of charter schools. We think we want great schools for children who are underserved, right? Whichever school that is. Measuring the micros is important. So we do this, but through academic results mainly. One, proficiency. Is the school outperforming on objective results other schools, district schools, other charters around? So that's first. Second, subgroup proficiency. How are the subgroups doing? Low income subgroups, minority subgroups, SPED subgroups. We spend a lot of time looking at culling the data that way. Third, growth. In addition to proficiency, how are our children growing from year to year? From fall to spring, from fall to fall on various measures. And then how are subgroups doing within that growth measure? Now, to the extent that data is still difficult to call, which post-pandemic, some of the data is quite hard. We'll look at neighborhood data, other So specifically, not just compared to the district or the area, let's get really micro and see whether you went to school A or school B, how you might have done. And we'll look at that level. So much harder to do, but it's definitely doable. And then last, we will spend a lot of time on subjective analysis, right? Classroom observations, looking at their pedagogy. And we're making an investment into these schools. We think that if they do A, B, and C right now, the data is going to be fantastic in 3 to 5 years. We're investors at the end of the day, social investors. And we'll do a really deep subjective analysis, especially if the school doesn't have a lot of data relevant. But for us to make an investment, there has to be a clear case that either proficiency, subgroup growth, neighborhood, or some kind of subjective analysis shows that this school is really already high quality or going to be high qualities. And we're pretty unapologetic about doing that, and also trying to get better at it. We're not necessarily, no one's expert at this. So we need to know that we need to keep getting better at it. So that's what I call the micro. That's something that's data we can measure in a year or two. And the second would be macro. And we're thinking long-term here, right? Over decades. We're going to hold 500 schools soon, billions of dollars, maybe $10 billion plus at some point. How are our students doing over a long period of time? It's just as data measurements get better. I know you guys do a lot of this. And as we get just better data out there, graduation, college, jobs, income, life outcomes, health, there's a lot of longitudinal data that I think we need to start holding ourselves accountable for that we can't. And it was harder 10, 20 years ago, stuff was harder to do. And as you guys know now, it's possible. It just needs to be, we have to hold ourselves accountable for doing it over decades. One, all the micro data, which is what we spend most of our time on. Macro data, which will start to come in longitudinally. And then third, as far as the whole sector and individual schools, is to me, is sustainability and scalability, right? Is what we're building as a charter school ecosystem and movement, is it something that is scalable? Because we're still well less than 10% of the student population out there, right? How can charter schools ever become 20% of the student population out there? Maybe, but only if the model is scalable and sustainable, right? So our schools have to be, they can't be relying on one superhero to run the place. They can't be relying on one funder or a couple funders because that money it's not scalable, right? And those talent not necessarily scalable if it's one superhero. You have to have systems. You actually have to have a model that is better. And I think as a sector, that last part, sustainability and scalability, is going to be a big question mark for us to see whether we can actually do this at scale, because that's how we're going to help tens of millions of kids. I'm excited for that. I do think the schools we invest in, we look for that. We look for, is this the kind of model that could be emulated or replicated?
And you put that into action, unless I'm missing it, because that very talk about scalable and sustainable, the bringing down the cost of facilities in charter schools and charter schools in underserved neighborhoods that are growing academically and the like. That's more money for these other purposes, and that is financially sustainable.
You hit the nail on the head. You hit the nail on the head here, right? In the business world, we'd call you'd want to invest in a business that has lower overhead and has a big market, right? And this is one of the weak points of charter schools, is that we have to pay for our facilities ourselves, and we have to pay more for the debt for our facilities, and the districts don't. So if you just looked at that one variable and invested in what you'd invest in the district, it's because it's not equitable, right? So what we're trying to do is create an equitable market where the charter school facility cost is the same as a district. And then we just have to be better running the school and run a level field, right? That's the idea. But you hit the nail on the head. What will make our movement sustainable is if we bring our overhead costs permanently down. We have to do that through facilities.
Sure. You mentioned a lot of different data metrics that you look at when you evaluate schools. What is a data metric that EFF sees as important that may be underappreciated in the bond market or not fully yet embraced?
I'd say two parts of our evaluation. That is, we have probably 50 different things we collect, but there's two that really stand out that you don't see it's very difficult to quantify in an appendix A, right? In a bond issuance, you'll see a little bit, but not a ton. First is talent and people, right? If you're a bond investor, you're not talking to the leadership team, you're not talking to the board. All you're seeing is some objective data on who they are. Who's on your C team? We talked about those leadership qualities and why. You really looking at that person line, getting to know them, the CEO, the C-level leadership. What's their experience? How long have they been there? Are they going to stick around? The board, like we talk to the board, do board interviews. The teachers, teacher pathways, teacher retention, everything around talent and people. Some of the stuff is you can put into a table. Some of the stuff you can't. Most of it you can't. And we think that this is, at the end of the day, we're investing in people. We're not investing in like a spreadsheet. And that's one thing we think we can quantify significantly better than you can out of appendix A. Two is what we just talked about in academics, right? Academic results are really nuanced. And you need to be an academic expert to really dive into whether that school is really a good school or not. But what we talked about are about proficiency in subgroups and growth data, subgroup growth data, neighborhood analysis, and other kind of subjective academic measurements. In the long run, that is the output of the school, right? If you're a business, you're measuring how good their car is, and then you invest in how good the car is. I don't think the bond market's really looking at the quality of the school in the way that's commensurate with the long term.
I think
I don't think
they
they can.
certainly are more than they did 5 years ago. That's part of the data that we capture in the School Improvement Partnership database that your schools provide us when we do reporting for you. I wonder whether they quite embraced the social impact metrics as something that, if you're doing that for investors that want to do well and do good, I think that's still perhaps evolved.
Yeah, and I don't blame them. Both these things are really difficult to measure at scale, and I know, and I appreciate that SIP is trying to create some transparency there. But I think that talent, people, and then school quality, those are the two big things that we spend a ton of time. In addition to all the other financial metrics and all the usual stuff, but those are two things we think in the long term, thinking about 10 years out, 20 years out, those are going to be driving excellence in schools.
Let's see, my last question really came to me yesterday morning. I'm reading, I don't know if you ever heard of Abraham Verghese. He's an author, one of my favorite authors. And I'm reading Cutting for Stone, which is his book.
Yeah.
And I came across something in there where he writes, it's actually a doctor in the book, says, you live life forward, but understand it backward. What is it that you understand now as the founder of EFF and as a dad that you wish you knew sooner?
I love that quote. I always think about Steve Jobs' graduation speech where he says, you can't connect dots going forward. You're going to connect them going backwards. It's a similar thought, right? Where for me, I didn't realize going through my career in the last 20 years, I didn't realize that all those experiences that I was going through, and some of them were difficult. Those were dots, right? It was me going to charter school board meetings when I was a kid, right? Or me working at this community school in India, sleeping on the floor, and I was just volunteering, right? It was like, and learning about how that community leader went door to recruit kids. I didn't realize I was that those were dots I was putting down, that without doing those things, I could never have started EFF, right? Learning about how state revolving funds worked, working at HIP, where I was a CFO in Austin, and learning how schools did payroll, and going to the state of Texas to campaign for the permanent school fund. These are all just things that I was interested in. And what I didn't realize at the time was that those were experiences that were leading to something big. And in working at the Charter School Growth Fund, where I learned how philanthropy worked and what philanthropy was looking for, I could not have connected those dots going. It wasn't like I was doing that hoping something good would come of it. If you go to college and you think I'm going to get a job, that's something clear. But you don't have all these experiences and knowing that it's going to lead to something big like this. And it's really cool looking back and seeing, wow, I'm connecting the dots, right? There's all these dots that are placed. And my advice I'd give to my son would be, you can be proactive on a lot of these things in life. There's some dots you can't connect going forward. There's some dots you can, right? Especially the way you live your life, the values you live by, the people you meet along. Like I didn't launch this fund alone. There's a lot of people who helped, right? And it was because I was always I was always people focused and talking to folks, and there are some values and ways you live by you can't connect going forward. That you always do the right thing. You always treat people well. You always seek to learn. Whatever you do, do it well. And that those kind of values will lead to good things. So I'd give my son the advice of a little more conscious about the way you spend your time, the way you spend your resources, the way you treat people, and knowing that you don't know where it's going to take you, but it's going to take you somewhere good. And those are dots you can connect going forward. Although I think it's true that most things are looking backward.
Wow. Thank you. I think not only the charter schools sector, entrepreneurs writ large, there's a lot in there for one to learn, which is really what are you uniquely on this world to do. And it takes a while to have the experience to find that direction. To be honest, you did it quicker than most. Thank you, Anand, for your being so generous with your time and insights with us. This is what charter school leadership looks like.
Thanks, Alan. And thank you to all the charter school leaders out there. I know you guys school is starting right now, first few weeks. This is the fun part, the tough part. Thank you to all you leaders, all the teachers, and hope it'll be a great year for our kids.